Peter, can you describe the operation you have here?
Well, we're running a cow and calf operation trying to turn off prime vealers for the wholesale butchers. We're using Angus Friesian cross dams and putting Limousin sires over them. We are using the Limousin sire wholly and solely as a terminal sire. We're not retaining any of the female portion of the drop. And we're aiming to, and we not only aim but we achieve, getting our calves live weight at about 10 months of age at about 380 kilos average, and that's over double decker load, 60, 61 or 2, or when we go on a dressed weight we like to get them up around about 210, 220.
What advantages do you see in crossbreeding rather than straight breeding?
Well, I think we're getting that hybrid vigour, and we're just getting that. I think we're just getting more weight into our calves. I think perhaps if you were chasing the feedlot industry, it'd be a different story. But we're aiming wholly and solely at the wholesale butchers.
Do you have a niche market in that?
Not totally. No one owns my cattle, but for a number of years we were putting most of our cattle into Safeway, but they got their kill a little bit too far away, so the last 3 years I think a fair few of our cattle have gone into Hartwick's at Kyneton. And I always do it through my stock agent because he knows what's going on with prices with other companies and seems to be able to negotiate me a fairly satisfactory price. I must say too, Brian, I as a producer I like to try and develop a relationship with the next tier of our operation, and accordingly I like to think that they respect us and can have an arrangement with us.
So you'd like to get some feedback on your cattle?
Particularly on our carcass cattle, the ones that are dressed, yes, I like to get the printouts and look at the feedback on them, and I always speak to the buyer, a week or two after just to see how they hung up.
Are there any disadvantages in what you do?
I suppose if there's anything using the Angus Friesian cross, or the F1s as we call them, we inclined to get a bit of a scouring problem, and I don't think it's us alone. I think it's fairly common. The Angus Friesian cross, even though we're in drought conditions at this very moment, they're still producing a lot of milk, and we do have a few scour problems. But other than that, they seem to have a satisfactory fat cover using the Limousin bulls, and the meat buyers seem happy with what we're doing.
It seems like you've got a very good combination, a good dairy base, producing vealers with cows that have a lot of milk. Are there any other combination of breeds that you think would work as well?
Perhaps there is. I think the Angus in the Western District, the Angus Friesian cross is by far the most popular for this vealer trade. But there's some people using Herefords, quite satisfactory Hereford Friesian crosses, and turning off some pretty good calves. But I prefer the Angus. They've got better udders. You don't get those little cancer eyes, which you're unfortunately inclined to get in the Herefords, and they just seem to be able to carry those udders a bit longer and do the job nicely.
How do you source your females?
Well, we were dairying ourselves up till 5 years ago. We run a dairy as well as 150 cows and calves, and we got out of the dairy side of it and lifted nearly doubled our cow and calf operation. So I was breeding all my own at that stage and doing it pretty well, because I would go out and I'd source pretty handy Angus bulls to get my heifers in calf, or my tail-in cows in calf, to make sure I had 40 or 50 replacement heifers. That's run out, so now I'm sourcing them from the F1 sale in Camperdown, which they have in January each year, which is probably one of the premier F1 sales, or if not the premier F1 sale in the state. And I'm selecting those. I like them to carve them about 2.5 years of age. Not like to get those heifers with a bit of depth about them. I don't like those big rangy type heifers. I like to get them with a little bit of depth about them. So I'm fairly selective, but they do become a bit costly.
Any issues with joining heifers and Limousin bulls in terms of dystocia?
Being an ex-dairy farmer, I watch my cattle when they're calving pretty closely. I always, every week or two, I go through and drag them into what we call the holding paddocks, and I'm not afraid to get up during the night if I've got a cow's calving to have a bit of a look at them, and if I feel there's any trouble, I'll bring them in to the stockyards and deliver a calf. But generally, we're not afraid to join heifers to Limousin bulls. Perhaps we, if there's such a thing, easy calving bulls of any breed, and keep a very close eye on them. And we don't have any problems.
Do you have any issues with Limousin and Temperament?
Definitely not. That has been I believe that's nearly been a myth. I really believe, and probably someone might put me straight on, but I believe if you've got bad temperament in your cattle, the first thing you should look at is the people who are handling them. We work through our cattle a lot. We feed out a lot of hay, and we're driving through them. We work them carefully through the yards. We've got very good facilities, and I think that makes all the difference. And I don't see that we've got a temperament problem at all.
Are there any management constraints to what you do?
No, I rotate paddocks. Being a former dairy farmer, you know, I'm not afraid to just keep moving them around.
What's your experience in crossbreeding with Drought?
Well, this is the first drought that I've ever experienced to this nature in 42 years here. We've had a couple of dry seasons in this part of the Western District, but never one like this. They tell me this is the driest season we've had in 104 years, so it's pretty severe. But at this stage, well, we got our calves up to our usual weight, which I tried, fed a bit of silage to finish them off, but we still got our calves up around that 380 kilo live weight, which I was really pleased about being able to do. And I suppose from here on in, it's in the lap of the gods. What is it? Nearly the 1st of April, and I've got about 180 calved. The cows have still got milk on them, plenty of milk on them, and in general, I think because I fed that a bit of silage to finish off my vealers, it's kept the cows in wonderful heart, and our cows are in pretty good heart at this stage, but we're going to have some rain fairly soon unless there's going to be some hard decisions made, and I'm confident we'll get it.
How do you source your sires?
I very selective in sourcing my Limousin bulls. The last 5 or 6 years, before, when I first started using Limousins, I suppose I'm using them for nearly 20 years, I was just buying them at the bull sale in Colac, and then I found myself just going up to the national sale at Wodonga, and then I got to a stage where I felt I wanted to develop a relationship with a breeder, so that I could have some assistance in selecting the sires from him, and also if there was problems, there was backup there. So the last 5 or 6 years we've been going up to Donna Valley to Greg and Mary Withers, and I don't want to give Greg and Mary a plug, but we're absolutely delighted with the bulls we've been buying up there.
Does having cows with very high milking capacity put a lot of pressure on them over the lifetime?
It certainly does, but you know, they're coping. They're coping with it, and we are lucky on this particular property here. We've got another one. We're not quite as lucky, but this one here we've got some about 100 acres of strawberry flats, which is rapidly running out. But we've basically been strip grazing that just to spin it out, and you know, we're just hanging in there.